Welcome to Peter's podcast, where we talk about real yoga, actual happiness, and deep living. Thanks for joining me. Hello, Lindsay.
Hi, Peter. It's good to
Good to
see
see
you.
you
Good to be
too.
here.
Wonderful. I had the great pleasure of teaching you in teacher training. When was that? Years ago.
That was years ago. That was
In
2018.
the before
I think I
times.
graduated 2019. Yeah, so feels like
Yeah.
lifetimes ago.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, for
Yeah.
people who don't know you, why don't you say a little bit about what it is that you do, what your background is training wise, and etc.
Yeah. My name's Lindsay Monal. I am based in Hoboken, New Jersey, and also in New York City. I did my initial teacher trainings originally at Hosh Yoga in Brooklyn, which is now closed, but with Roque Rodriguez and Miki Hirano, who were ISHTA grads. And then they, sometime along that training, turned me on to ISHTA. So I had taken, I remember, class with Alan, and then I had taken a few classes with Mona, and I was like, okay, I definitely want to take my training here. So did my 300 hour at ISHTA, and then kind of got the like training bug, or like the infection of yoga, where you learn about all these amazing things and you then realize you know nothing about them even after trainings, right? You just like want to scoop up more. So I continued to do trainings in sound meditation. I had done Mona's yoga nidra trainings, yin yoga, restorative, trauma informed yoga trainings, just kind of like whatever thing I could get my hands on, and then just have continuously, done mentorships and things like that to deepen my learning. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
When we
now I've
were,
gotten to a place where okay.
no, that's okay. When we were in your 300 training, I remember you were doing something that was not yoga as business. And one of the unique things about what you've been able to do is to turn your practice also into what you do for a living.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
what was
So
that transition?
Yeah, so while I was training, I was working for a company called Gym Pass, which now they've rebranded to Well Hub, but similar to ClassPass, like a corporate wellness benefit company. And I was traveling for them, and I continued with that job through the pandemic, through the lockdowns. I was lucky enough to work online at home for them, and then during the pandemic, another studio that I had been teaching at in Hoboken, New Jersey, after they closed, they had partnered with this company called Yoga Renew, which is an online yoga teacher training platform. And because the Yoga Alliance finally allowed online yoga teacher training to be certified,
Mm-hmm.
they were hiring staff for these online teacher trainings, because you need to have a certain number of contact hours still through the Yoga Alliance, even if it's virtual. So they were hiring a bunch of teachers, and they hired a lot of teachers out of our studio because they wanted to bring their team along with them. So I started teaching online on Zoom with them, and then eventually kind of figured out, I was loving teaching on Zoom. I really wanted to move into yoga as a full-time career. So I ended up quitting my job kind of before I really got fully hired into the position I'm in now, but quit my job and decided I would do a mixture of yoga privates and Reiki and, sound and whatever mixture of things. And then I had reached out to them and said if you needed any help with marketing, that I was available. I had just quit my job, and they hired me. So now
Mm.
do a really beautiful mix of marketing and yoga teaching and teaching in the teacher trainings. Um, and it's allowed me to have this lifestyle, which I think is really hard for a lot of yoga teachers. I see most yoga teachers teaching 8 to 12 classes, 15 classes a week. And I'm lucky enough that because of the marketing piece of it, where I'm doing some administrative work, I'm able to teach yoga as basically my full-time job, along with the other piece that's the marketing aspect.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
Yeah.
So, in your marketing role, what are you noticing? Because this is for people who want to take teacher training, correct?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What
yeah.
is it?
It's
What is it that is
200, 300.
attracting them? Is it becoming a teacher, like as a part of their business, or is it mostly deepening practice?
I think it's a mixture of both for a lot of people. I think some people come to the online training because they want to become yoga teachers, and some people come to it just to deepen their own practice and never, go through the whole process of going through the Yoga Alliance and all of that. But what I found, because I think myself as well as many yoga teachers, especially pre-pandemic, were very anti-online yoga teacher training, right? We kind of looked at it as like something that wasn't valid, wasn't like, where did you get your certification, right? Like something
Right.
that wouldn't really be looked at as like real training. But what I found in teaching in the program, it's really shifted my perspective around it, because a lot of the students that come onto the training are in like rural parts of America where there's no yoga studio for 100 miles. They don't have access to yoga studios in the same way that we do in New York, New Jersey, where you throw a rock and there's 5 yoga studios there, right?
Yeah.
So I've really, it's shifted my perspective around it a lot, where the people who are coming to these trainings, number one, might not have access to studios and great teachers like we do in big cities. And also people who just have untraditional schedules that just aren't able to take off, 10 weekends in a row and dedicate that to teacher training, right? They're able to do it instead after they come home from work, or they're working parents, or they're trying to balance multiple things. And so the online training platform really gives them an opportunity to learn and to deepen their practice, and start to get that information so that they can go out and teach if they choose to. And it definitely is a little bit different, right? You don't get exactly all the hands-on experience that you do in an in-person training, but I found that because even some of the graduates now have graduated the online training and then come in person and are now teaching actually at our studio in Hoboken, and some of them have
Wow.
enrolled in our in-person 300. So it's really cool to see, like, there's that initial learning curve, I think, with any new yoga teacher, right, where you graduate teacher training and you're still awkward for the first couple of months of training no matter what, right? But it gives you that strong enough foundation where once you start getting in front of people, you can start to teach and actually make a career out of it. So
Yeah.
it's really been a really unique opportunity for me.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I interrupted your talking about your own work with training and flowing into,
Mm,
practice. And, some people sort of grab a nugget out of training and then they want to make it all themselves and personalize, and that's sort of their way
mm,
of orienting. Even, I'm sure you remember there was a like a final at the end of training where you present a little model class, like a 20-minute class or something like that.
mm-hmm,
And I always anticipate that people will come to that and like teach what they've learned, or teach basically like a copy of a
mm,
class that they've been attending from us. But some people are just like, no, I'm going to do this,
mm-hmm,
recreating of the wheel class. And so
mm-hmm,
it's interesting to hear when someone is interested in continuing learning, and building that into their practice. So how do you feel about that? How do you balance that learning versus applying? Because I know, even I think it was last year, you attended a workshop on the Bhagavad Gita with me, saying I just
mm-hmm.
felt like I wanted to like get back to the classroom.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I've always been like a nerd in that way. Like I always loved school. I always wanted to keep learning. If college wasn't $1 million a year, I would probably go back for a master's and whatever. But I think I just I think I just found the subject matter of yoga to be so fascinating. And I really, for myself, I know that I do the best and I feel the most connected when I'm in community around it. And so I really have found trainings to be that thing for me that keeps me consistent with my practice, that keeps me excited about my practice, excited about learning more. And so, it's not that I'm in these long trainings all year, but I try to seek out at least weekend long immersions or mentorship programs that keep me, connected to a community of people who are like minded and who are interested in discussing these things. And I feel, especially as somebody who's now shifted into the role of being a teacher in teacher trainings and teaching meditation and all these things in classes to prospective teachers and students, it's like, the best teachers have a teacher too, right? Like for me to continue to be a good teacher, I need to continue to learn, because otherwise I feel like I get stagnant, or I feel like, the material isn't as fresh or as like exciting to me. So as a way to just keep it exciting and keep it relevant and keep myself learning more and more, I've just gravitated to continuously taking any workshop and training that sparks my interest.
Yeah. It's like a source of inspiration. The practice is one
Yeah.
part, and the learning is another part. Yeah. Very
Yeah.
cool.
And every time I come to it, it's brand new content. You know what I mean? Like I took your Bhagavad Gita workshop, which was like a 1 day thing, like last year, and then this year recently, another teacher in our 300 hour here was teaching a segment on Yoga Sutras. And, I had done the Yoga Sutras, I've studied, I've read the Yoga Sutras, but I went back to it, and it's just like beginning again, right? Because we're never the same person. Like, even hearing this information, these quotes, these stories I've heard before, the way that I understand it gets so much deeper every time that I hear it. So it's just like reinforcing that thing and strengthening that connection within me, so that I can really speak from an embodied place and from a place where I've, done the work of deciphering this information for myself. So, yeah, I just love teacher training.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I think that
Yeah.
we keep growing, and so the one of the beauties of yoga training or teaching, or the stuff of yoga, the self-study piece
Hmm.
of it all, is that it is this kind of onion-like information where you just keep getting more and more
Hmm.
richness from it. So, you know,
Yeah.
as you said so eloquently, it's like just really great to keep bringing yourself back into it and see what it means to you now.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah,
And also, I think, in the context of a 200 to 300 hour training, you're learning all this brand new information within a short span of time. And so, while I did learn so much and did digest a lot, there's still so much that, like, my brain kind of skimmed over because I was worried about how I was going to sequence this class or whatever other thing happening in the training. And so, I think coming back to training after you've had space away from it really gives you an opportunity to re-examine things that maybe you missed the first time around, or just having a greater context of yoga. When you hear something new, then it might connect to something else that you learned that you didn't even realize connected in the first place.
absolutely. I especially feel that for people, we just did a summer intensive training. So they packed their whole
Mm-hmm.
200 hours into 3.5 weeks. And I say
Yeah.
early on, you're not going to get all this, but
Yeah.
it's okay because it's washing over you, and you'll go back to it, and
Mm-hmm.
it will mean more
Yeah.
that you've done it. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
wonderful. Um, so you're teaching regular classes also. You're teaching class besides the teacher training. You also have a regular class schedule, and that's a
Yeah.
broad collection of classes as well, right? What are you teaching?
Actually, I've niched myself down now. I teach the same thing all the time. I teach
Oh,
yin
okay.
yoga and sound meditation. Yeah, I
As one
even in
class?
my in all of my trainings, yeah, as one class. So it's like one day it's 75 minutes, but most days it's 60 minutes, where we do like 40 minutes of yin and then like 15-ish minutes of sound meditation at the end. As we're expanding the schedule a little bit here, I'll be teaching some yoga nidra classes as well, and potentially some restorative here and there. But I think I always, as much as I love the physical vinyasa hatha practice, I just feel like I'm like too sweaty of a teacher to be teaching that. Like I'm sweating more than the students when I'm talking, and I'm like, it's too much for me. So I feel like my very vata pitta brain needs the grounding, and so the yin and the sound and the slow stuff is really where I feel most comfortable. So I've been, narrowed
That's
myself down
great.
into that path, which has been really beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so great. So I know that the sound what do you call it? Sound healing, sound meditation.
Yeah, I've started to call it sound meditation more,
Hmm.
because I feel like healing has its own implications, right? People think, oh, I'm going to come to this thing and I'm going to be healed, right?
Hmm.
Or it also kind of, gives me a lot of power as the healer in the room, right? It kind of suggests that I know something that they don't, and therefore I'm going to do this healing to you. And so I've tried to, I use sound healing, like you'll see it on my website, you'll see it in the language that I use from time to time talking about it. But I really have tried to shift more towards sound meditation just because I feel like people are more familiar with what meditation is, and it kind of evokes a sense that you as a practitioner or you as a student coming to the class are playing a more active role in it, right? So it's not just a sound bath, right? Where maybe you think, oh, first of all, what's a bath, right? Am I getting naked for this thing, right? Am
Right,
I in
right.
water? Is there water involved, right? But like a sound meditation, right? I think implies a bit more of nuance around, okay, I'm going to come to this thing. We're going to use sound as the tool, as the focus of the meditation. And it's that anchor that I can come back to when my mind starts to wander or whatever. So I've tried to shift a little bit more of the language towards sound meditation, but for like SEO purposes, sound healing is a thing that most people are Googling. So I
Hmm.
weave that in there here and there too.
Yeah, yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
And you studied that, right? You did some on your own, but you also studied sound healing slash
Yeah.
meditation. Yeah.
Yeah, so around the time actually that I was doing my 300, I had done a workshop with this teacher, Mara Liz Campos, at Three Jewels in the city downtown. And this was again before the pandemic. I bought a bowl from her, and I was learning all these meditation techniques and things all at once. And so I was just kind of curious what was out there. And I had a bowl, and I would, sometimes incorporate it into my classes that I was teaching, but not so much until the pandemic when I really was like looking for anything to make me feel sane again, right? Like so many of us were.
Hmm.
And I purchased a set of crystal bowls because I, had interest in them and already some experience from that initial training, and just found that as really a super grounding practice for myself, a more active type of meditation, right? Where, especially for me as the one playing the bowls, it required a little bit of my attention. And I would start playing and I would say, oh, I'll sit down for 5 minutes and play. And then 40 minutes would pass and I had still been playing the bowls. And so I just found myself really like gravitating toward it. So once studios began to reopen after the pandemic, I just, started incorporating it to my class. The owner of the studio that I started teaching at invited me to start sharing it as part of the practice. And I think before the pandemic, I was always teaching yin and restorative yoga nidra meditation, and my classes would have like 4 or 5 people, right? I'm not you. I wasn't Alan Finger at the time. No one was coming to my meditation class. And post pandemic, I found that my classes were the most popular classes on the schedule. Like I was, beating out these vinyasa classes with really experienced, wonderful teachers. Not that it's a competition, but just we
Hmm.
could see that the students were more gravitating toward these slower practices more than they had been pre-pandemic. And so once I saw that, and with my experience already teaching in teacher training, I was getting asked like, how do I learn to play bowls? How do I learn? So then I went into, super learner mode, and I was like, I need to take a billion trainings. So I took like 4 or 5 more trainings on sound
Wow.
healing. I flew to Florida for one, which was really cool. I've been training most recently with teachers online. So one in LA, Allison Bagg, and another teacher who's here in New York, Jackie Cantwell, and have done mentorships with them for the past like year or so, continuously, weekly.
Hmm.
So I've been just really in this, deep learning about it, learning about the science, reading every book, listening to every podcast, just trying to educate myself as much as possible on it. And I think because the instruments, specifically sound bowls, aren't very hard to play, it's easy to teach somebody how to play a bowl, right? It's like you just kind of bring the mallet around and it starts to sing. But I think because of the background that I have teaching meditation, teaching yin, teaching restorative, and knowing how to hold space for people and knowing how to guide a meditation experience, I think that's really helped me translate this into trainings that I'm leading now and sharing this with potential students and healers of all sorts that come to learn about the bowls and about the different instruments. So I'm starting to expand now into more instruments, but bowls have really been the cornerstone of my practice for a few years now.
That's awesome. What would you say, given that you've been studying for hours and hours and hours and you could never say all that in a minute, like what's like a core thing that you're bringing in that's different
Mm.
from somebody just moving a mallet around a bowl?
Yeah, oof. I don't know. I think the difference, I don't know. I mean, everyone brings something different to any class that they lead, right? Just as you were saying earlier, of all these people can take ISHTA's teacher training, and then at that graduation class, we all spin it in our own unique way,
Right.
right? I think based in with my background of like energy healing and being a Reiki practitioner, I think there's always an aspect of that where I'm really energetically thinking about the space in the room and thinking about the four corners and the walls in this container that I'm creating for people. I practice often in a pretty loud space where there's like a bus station across the street. And I often find myself like energetically building a force field around the room. Like no one can hear the buses, no one can hear the buses, right? But um, yeah, I think just my continuous commitment to learning and trying to improve and trying to be the best facilitator makes it a good experience for the students. And just like those repetitions, right? Like that idea of it takes 10,000 hours to become a master at something. Maybe I'm not at 10,000, but I'm definitely at least at like 2 or 3,000 at this point,
Mm-hmm.
right? And just like the repetition of teaching 3 times a week and being in front of, holding space for 70, 100 people a week, it just like is in my DNA now. And so I think um I'm just fortunate to be in the position to do this. We have some chimes coming in now too.
Yes,
And
it's a bit windy up here.
yeah, and I think too just the instruments, so I've invested quite a large sum of money in some of the instruments that I've purchased. And this brand called Crystal Tones, they create these what they call alchemy singing bowls that are infused with healing stones like amethyst and uh,
Hmm.
all different types of crystals. And so I think that's one thing to look for if you are seeking out sound practitioners, sound healing. There are crystal bowls you can get on Amazon that are beautiful instruments that are still deeply healing and deeply powerful, but I really have gravitated toward these crystal tones bowls that just like sound like little fairies. And
Mm.
I think just the all the intention that goes into creating the bowls, creating the instruments, them being such a unique pairing, right? I haven't bought them in the set, but instead like sought out each individual
Mm.
instrument to create the collection that I have. So I think there's just more intention, more love behind it than maybe somebody who just has picked up their first bowl off the internet.
Right.
But again, it's not to say that that can't be incredibly powerful and healing too. And I think in my own practice, I really am just striving toward making this stuff as accessible as possible. I started with, $300 bowls off Amazon and helped a lot of people with those. And so I,
Mhm.
part of the reason I've gravitated so much toward teacher training is because I realize I can only do so much as one person, right? I can only hold so many sound meditations a week. I can only teach so many yoga classes. But when I can empower somebody else with this knowledge and they can go out and teach their families and their communities and their schools and their workplaces, then that that's shifting much more than I could do alone. So I think the teacher training piece of it is just like essential in getting more of this out there.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Do you, just to stay on the specifics of the bowls for a moment, are you
Mm.
choosing the tones from some kind of system, or are you doing this all intuitively?
Yeah, so the way that you buy Crystal Tones bowls, it's like a little a little weird, right? Like you have to know someone who knows someone who sells them. Like it's a whole a whole thing. But initially, when I purchased my bowls, I had done like a little meditation and visualize what kinds of instruments I wanted to bring in, what kinds of intentions I wanted to bring in into the instruments. And I sent that information like through a little questionnaire back to the factory in Utah that makes them. And they kind of curated a little set for me of three bowls. And I'm very like trust the universe type of person. So I was like, perfect, those are my bowls. So I got those right away. And they're really beautiful bowls. And then recently I purchased two more, and those I was a little bit more intentional about which notes and which alchemies I was buying. So I bought a larger 10-inch amethyst bowl that's a G, and then I also bought a little tiny 6-inch G. And so I have like the octave now. I've got a perfect fifth in the group. So there's a little bit of music theory as well involved with it because you want things to harmonize, but
Hmm.
also there's benefit to having some type of dissonance in your sound meditation as well when things don't perfectly sound so great. So I have like an F sharp now and a high G that are
Mm,
a little close to each other and give you that little sense of friction.
right.
So yeah, so as I continue to grow, now that I have five, I kind of have enough to play with in the scale. But as I continue to grow the collection, which I'm sure I undoubtedly will, I'll start to pick other harmonic instruments and other things that kind of don't sound so great together, so I can kind of play with different chords throughout the practice.
Cool. That sounds amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
hopefully, we're going to get a little listen in a little while here
Yeah.
of what you're up to. I hope this isn't putting you on the spot. I don't think it will. But one of the things that, as you know, a teacher trainer of a previous generation has gotten to watch is this real shift in something maybe I would loosely call authority or something along the lines of like how lineage
Mm-hmm.
works and the hierarchy, teacher student, and things like that. And as time goes on, I've seen such a shift in the way that students relate to those topics, to lineage, to authority, to hierarchy. And I'd love to hear what you think around those topics. I mean, you're very plugged in. You've been very much like in the digital world for a long time. And
Mm-hmm.
what do you see? How do you feel about that? I mean, some of the stuff you just said about, you know, teaching other people, empowering, these are words that are, you know, I think
Mm-hmm.
more aligned with where we are today than where we came from 4 generations
Mm-hmm.
ago, where people were like
Yeah.
standing and beating sticks to get you to do poses, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. That's such a great question. I think um, along with my message of empower as many people as possible to do this work, I think I really try to emphasize in all the trainings that I teach that, coming to what I'm teaching now is like a 10-hour sound training over 2 days, right? Like 5 hours and 5 hours. I try to really emphasize to them that, like, coming to one 10-hour long weekend training does not necessarily make you a sound healer, right? It's like, this is the first day. This is the opening of the door of this thing, and I really try to encourage people to continue to seek out classes and courses and practice on their own before they go out and teach, start marketing themselves as the world's greatest healer and, the person that's going to solve all their problems. Because I think, yeah, I go back to this lineage piece of it so much and just this like integrity around the practices and really not just taking a teacher training to check a box to say, oh, now I'm a certified this and that, but actually embodying, doing the work to really feel like you are owning the material that you're sharing. And so, I've gravitated now the studio that I teach at, Yoga Renew in Hoboken. we all kind of follow the lineage of Iyengar yoga. And so all the classes here are like sequenced, even though it's vinyasa yoga, it's sequenced under Iyengar lineage and Iyengar alignment principles, which I think makes it very clear and makes it very um, concise across teachers, right? There's not a teacher saying, turn your foot in warrior two and turn your foot out, right? Everyone's kind of got the same baseline that they're working off of. So I think along with ISHTA, like I think I gravitate towards things that I know are deep and real and true, because I think there's a lot of wishy-washy yoga out there where people are pulling from a lot of different lineages and putting their own spin on things. And so I think, again, that's why I, as a teacher, go back to trainings over and over, because I want to know what's the source, what's the truth of this, right? Not, I don't really want the watered down piece of it. Um, so yeah, it's tough. It's I want everyone has something unique to share and to offer. So it's not that I want everyone to do the exact same thing, but um, I think that there's a lot of value in being rooted in one lineage of one thing and teaching that well versus kind of dabbling in lots of different practices.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you. Um,
Mm.
do you want to play something for us?
Sure, I would love to play something for you.
Yeah, give us a little demo of
Mm.
the bowls in action.
Yeah, for sure.
Great. So now we're here with your beautiful setup of bowls. We have three that are clear, two that are translucent, and they each have a different pitch, and all together they make a chord together. It's quite lovely. So, yeah, tell us a little bit about each one, and then go ahead and lead us in a little sound meditation.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm here with my five bull children, each of them a different size and a different note. And so each one has a different alchemy or a different crystal or intention set with it. I don't know exactly all the materials that each one is made of, but they're mostly made out of crystal quartz crystal, and then infused with other crystals or other precious metals or gemstones or different things that give them the different qualities that they each have. So this big one here is amethyst. It's a G note, 10-inch, and then I've got a 9-inch B note. This one's called androgynous indium. So the intention behind it is unifying yin and yang and like lunar and solar energies, Ida Pingala, right? It's all about balancing those kind of that duality. This middle bowl here is a grandmother alchemy bowl. Note is D, and she is a grandmother, right? So I think of her as bringing this kind of ancestral healing, ancestral support into the space. I secretly have little names and intentions behind all of them, little like they each have their own personality to me. So this is the grandmother bowl, really all around bringing in kind of a femininity, a loving, nurturing energy into the space, similar to this next bowl, which is the Mother of Platinum. It's a F sharp note. And this one, I think of her as kind of like a little Virgo perfectionist. She's bringing in like this kind of angelic quality to her to connect us with higher realms and with spirituality. And then lastly, I have the Green Goddess bowl, which is a 6-inch. So definitely leaning into the femininity on this side of the charts here. And these I feel are a little bit more of the kind of masculine energy. But yeah, they're all together. They make a beautiful little family. We've got some unique kind of note pairings together. And beyond some of the other crystal bowls, these are cooked at a much higher temperature. So that's what gives them this kind of transparency and also makes them thinner. And so they're much more subtle when you play them versus one of those bigger frosted bowls that have kind of that texture
Right.
on the outside. Those bigger bowls can get much louder, which is great. Like they can project the sound much further, but these are much more delicate and sensitive and don't take much to start singing. You kind of just, even if I tap it with a finger, it's already resonating.
So they
And
actually
so
ring
they're
more
just a little bit more
easily.
delicate. Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah. And they're much easier to kind of overplay, right? With any crystal bowls that you play, if you keep playing them too much or too loud, they'll shatter eventually once you hit that kind of resonant frequency of the bowl, like an opera singer singing across a room and breaking a crystal glass, right? Same thing can happen with these. So they're much more sensitive. So you can't really work them too hard. They like to be played with grace, with
Yeah,
ease.
wonderful. So please give us a little taste of what you do with them.
Yeah. So I'll just invite you wherever you are to find a comfortable seat. If it's safe and you're not driving, maybe close your eyes here for a moment and just take a few deep breaths, settling into your body, into the chair, whatever support is beneath you. And actually, to start, I'll invite you just to feel some of your own vibration. While these are really powerful instruments, there's no better frequency for our healing than our own voice. So we'll just take a few rounds of humming, and you can do that by breathing in through your nose. And as you exhale, make an M sound. You can do that 4 or 5 more times in through the nose, out with an M sound. You can continue like that, or just allow your own sound to fade as you start to listen to the bowls moving through the ethers towards your body. Deep breath in, full breath out. Really gently here. Begin to come back to your breath. A full deep breath in. Big, complete breath out. If you've drifted off somewhere far, just come back to your body. Wiggle your fingers, your toes gently. Flutter your eyes open. Come back to the space. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Lindsay. That was fabulous. So you were both making circles around. What is the mallet that you're using? What is it made of?
It's like it's a open hole. It's got like a, it's almost like a PVC
Huh,
pipe, but it's wrapped in rubber. So it's got like a rubber
stickiness.
texture to it.
Mm.
Yeah, it's got a little stickiness. And for other types of bowls, they have other types of mallets, like wooden mallets or mallets that have kind of that ball of rubber at the
Mhm.
bottom of it. But the crystal tones ones come with this type of mallet. I would never use wood on this. This it would crack it. You'd have to use something
Mhm.
softer. Um, but yeah,
So you had both
the
the
mallet, little
movements
wand.
around and you also sometimes struck the bowls gently with that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So you can strike the bowl or you can sing the bowl. Just bring the mallet
Yeah.
around.
Beautiful. You have a ruckus going on over there now.
I know, yeah. Flash just let out in the other room.
That's
Apologies.
okay.
Here, I can bring this mic a little closer.
Yeah. That was really, really wonderful. And so when you lead a class, like you put this into a class, you've done some yin, and then you do this as the concluding meditation. And you were saying it's like,
Yeah,
go on.
so yeah, typically at the end of a yin practice, we only really do 3 or 4 yin postures, and then we move into shavasana. And I'll teach this for 10, 15 minutes
While people are
shavasana
in Shavasana, you're
meditation.
leading this.
Um, Yeah. And sometimes I'm leading a few throughout the summer, just straight up sound meditations where people just come, and with more time, I can incorporate more instruments, right? Because if I change instruments too frequently, then it kind of creates a stir in the room. So typically for something that's like a 10-minute Shavasana practice, I'll only really play the bowls and maybe a chime. But in a longer practice, I can incorporate the gong, or I have like an ocean drum, I have a buffalo drum. So in longer practices, I can incorporate more instruments. But for the purposes of Shavasana, I find the bowls to be the most pleasant.
Nice. So I'll put all information in the notes for the show about where people could experience this in person. But for those people who don't look at show notes, can you just say a good place to look for what you're doing?
Yeah, so you can find me 3 times a week at least at Yoga Renew in Hoboken, New Jersey. It's right across the street from the PATH train station. So if you take the PATH train to Hoboken, you can find me across the street. I teach a few times a week in yoga and sound meditation. And I'll be leading a sound training this September, as well as some other meditation and teacher trainings here in Hoboken. And online, you can find me at Smiling in Shavasana on Instagram, and hoping to have some more online offerings specific to sound in the future. So stay tuned for that.
Awesome, awesome. Well, such a delight to talk with you. I'm so glad that you're doing things that are so meaningful, heart wise, and really a delight to see you blossom as a teacher.
Thank you so much, Peter.
Yeah.
It's all because of
Not all because of me,
you.
but I'm glad I had a little piece in it. Wonderful. Take care. Talk soon.
Yeah.
Namaste.
Thank you.